An absolutely huge win for Galway in the All-Ireland quarter-final against Tipperary. Finished up 323 to 224, and a real test of character for Galway, and they came through. Tipperary died with their boots on, so from that point of view, you couldn't say that they didn't leave everything out on the field, but like towards the end of the game, Galway took full advantage of the 14 men. When they came out with the ball, they worked it very well. They got it up the field, they got it to the shooters. They scored 1-4 from the 67th minute on. And that goal that was taken by Hart towards the very end of the game, which put Galway in front for the first time since, I mean, you have to go back very, very early in the game to when they had kind of taken over against Tipperary, and Tip had sort of jumped ahead. I think it was kind of just coming up to half time, and it looked like Tipperary were ready to make a burst and kick on after going 2-13 to 2-9 ahead at half time. And Galway missed their first three chances of the second half, which I suppose in a way, because they were creating and just missing chances, maybe that was a sign of what was to come, that they weren't going to back down. Tipperary tacked on 2 more points, went 6 ahead by the 44th minute of the game. But from then on, it was Galway, and Galway won the second half by 6 points. And you like actually even flip that around a little bit more, having won the game by 2 points. They actually won the final 25 or so minutes plus injury time by 6 points. So really, really strong performance down the stretch for Tipperary. Maybe to some degree playing another game against another top team. Maybe that has kind of I don't know, like a couple of the players you could see were very, very leggy. Kilkenny obviously beat Galway last week, so it's a very short turnaround for both teams. But Tipperary looked very, very leggy. I think Noel McGrath scored 4 points in the first half, and his wrists and shooting were brilliant, and he set up a point for Jason Ford as well. But really, you could see he looked quite sluggish and wasn't quite himself. And there was a few other players like that. Paddy Maher didn't quite look himself. There was a lot of the Tipperary backs just well, actually throughout the field just didn't look themselves. Like Michael Breen took over the game against Cork last week. He got 1 point after a brilliant puck out snap, but wasn't quite the same. I think Niall O'Mara, he should have hooked Patrick Horgan for the goal last week, and he probably shouldn't have got done the way he was with that sidestep from Cathal Mannion for the goal. But I think Tipperary were kind of the authors of their own downfall a little bit. That goal, I think there was great patience from Galway to work that ball to Aidan Hart, and that was obviously like the crucial score. Could Brian Hogan have got down to it? Probably need to see a couple more replays. But either way, the patience of Galway to work it around. After Paddy Cadell had given away a bit of a turnover, and he'd come on and done quite well, but his turnover allowed Galway to get it. And just before that, Barry Heffernan had blocked down Joe Canning, and like from open play, Barry Heffernan was brilliant in that particular tussle, and Tipperary needed to get that win there. But Canning was superb from the place balls. That sideline he got more or less at the 21. That was with 62 minutes gone, and that levelled the game after a needless foul from Ronan Maher on Brian Concannon. The Tipperary full back line was under serious pressure, hence why both Ronan Maher and Cathal Barrett, who ultimately got a second yellow card, and I don't think anyone really complained about the second one. The first one, I don't know, they are and aren't given at times. But the full back line was under so much pressure, and there was yellow cards for both of them lads back there. At the start of the game, I thought Alan Flynn going midfield was a bit of an unusual one, but it turned out he did very well back there. But maybe his pace could have been used a little bit more in the back line, in that full back line. So it's Robin Peter to pay Paul, and Seamus Kennedy not being available. He wasn't in the 26. Possibly that came home to roost. Like for Galway, like that in that first half, after starting relatively poorly, and you wondered, what was the future for them in this game when you saw Dahi Burke, who's not long back from injury, slipping and Callan burying a beauty. You started to wonder, are they in bother there? And Shane Cooney did a lot of good things, but he made a couple of mistakes. But there was always an answer from Galway, and that was the big thing here. Now from like the 10th minute on, they were at that stage down by, I think it was something in the region of, they were down by 4 points, 1-3 to 2 points. They outscored Tipperary by 2-4 to 2 points from in the next 11 minutes. Now Tipperary burst back and did something similar as well, but it was just Davy Burke was sweeping. It wasn't really working. This is the captain a couple of years ago, and he was taken off at half time. So Shane O'Neill wasn't afraid to make the big decisions, and he wasn't afraid to make them early. So if you're to go on the sideline, which manager got it more right? I mean, obviously Galway came out on top, but Shane O'Neill made that big decision, and he made the big decision early. Whereas Tipperary, could they have made other decisions a little earlier? Could a couple of the players who looked like they were lacking legs in that game, and Tipperary looked like they were lacking legs, and just were just running out of road. It felt like that at different parts of the game. It was unbelievably stressful game to watch, I'd say, even for neutrals. It was just so tight and physical, and there was never a sign that one team was necessarily going to pull away. But you'd have to credit Shane O'Neill for the switches he made, even bringing in Evan Nyland towards the end. He got that free, like bringing in Adrian Toohey. He won a couple of turnovers. He set up his patience, set up that goal for Hart as well. But Tipperary just handed a lot of scores to Galway, and I felt, Paddy Maher overcarried one in 10 minutes, give away a free. Now that didn't end up in a score. Barrett with a pick-up on the ground after 21 minutes, and that allowed Joe Canning to knock over a point. And then there was situations where Tipperary hit some bad wides. Now, over the course of the game, they knocked over 26 of 40 attempts, and now there was 3 attempts into one that led to a goal for Bonner Maher just before half time. And it was kind of the way he snuck that ball away from Shane Cooney, who tried to lift it up as he was more or less lying on the ground, and Bonner picked his pocket. But like even Brian Hogan had that free just into injury time, and it was saved beautifully over the bar. I didn't quite pick up who saved it over the bar. But Tipperary they handed some scores to Galway, but that was possibly the sign of a tired team. And you could see that, like Niall O'Mara wasn't quite himself. Like he's been brilliant at times. Like Breen, as I said, he was brilliant last week. Didn't really kind of get it done here. And Tipperary, the sign of a tired team is to give away an awful lot of frees. And in that second half, when Galway were struggling, you look at minute 41, free knocked over by Joe Canning, same 42, same 50, 51, 53. So over and over and over. Galway's, I think, probably had a little bit more energy. Whatever the reason is, they seemed like they had a small bit more energy, and they were able to keep Tip on the back foot. Again, free 62 minute, free 67 minute, free 74 minute, all knocked over by Joe Canning, and he's going to punish you. So now Galway are a dangerous animal. But as things stand, we don't know the result of Clare against Waterford. Galway are going to have a tall order to win All-Ireland from here, but a game, because they're going to have to beat probably, most likely, Limerick and Kilkenny, maybe Waterford, maybe Clare as well, but that seems to be their route after beating Tipperary in a grueler. Now this was a massive test of character, and Galway stood up to it, and they had great performances all over the field. Like even Dahi Burke, who didn't look right at the start of the game, he stepped up as it went on. He made a great impact in the game. And Sean Loftus came in, got a nice little point after a tough week against Owen Cody last week and taken off. So you've players who stood up all over the field. Even Grode McInerney, who probably didn't have the most standout game that he's ever had, he started stepping up towards the end. But Tipperary, an awful lot of mistakes. Paul Flynn, even with a turnover towards the end, he'd come on and he'd turned his man, and it looked like he was in a position to either take on a point himself. He tried to find a man on the inside, ends up getting turned over, and that was the Loftus point that I talked about. But probably just not quite enough energy in that Tipperary team. Love to know what people make of that performance from Galway, and even Pádraig Mannion going down with a shoulder, and you thought that could be the end of him on 55 minutes, and that wasn't. That was just 2 minutes after the red card to Cathal Barrett, and you almost thought if he stays on the field, could this be a bit of an equaliser? That will he be sort of pulling up lame a little bit, and is it almost going to be like 14 versus 14 and a half? But no, he stayed going, and that made all the difference to them. One bone of contention for Tipperary, I think in 64 minutes, point ahead at this stage, and there was a free that Jason Flynn seemed to have won out on the sideline, and then the referee turned over the decision, did a throw ball, but then again Tip got the next score anyway, so maybe that didn't have too much of an impact. But I think a bit of wastefulness from Tipperary, like Brian Cannon, what a threat on the inside, brilliant finish for his goal. Conor Whelan, what a player. Jake Morris, probably another player who's quiet and could have had a red. Noel McGrath, as I said, he looked very, very sluggish. He looks like a player who's really, really tired. Those 11 weeks in a row with the club, and then obviously grueling enough few games with Tipperary. It was kind of reminded me a little bit of scoring the 4 points. Billy Dooley in 1994, just kind of almost the ball comes to him, and just the class that he has means the scores. But that's kind of it. Galway go through, and they're going to be a tough team to beat from here. That the way they threw away the Leinster final, and I mean that in the sense of their poor shooting and stuff like that. I wonder, will they go less towards the sweeper angle from here on out and sort of trust the players that they have in attack, because they have an awful lot of good stuff going for them, but against maybe a Limerick it might come up a little bit short. But look, we'll see how the draw goes, and we'll see how the other game goes. Fantastic display when you're under fire, and cool heads, the likes of Canning up there in front, up in the attack line to knock over the ball from all the place balls. Conor Whelan, as I said, leading the line. A lot of big players stepping up for Galway, and nobody will necessarily want to face them.